Hello and welcome to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers play games from the past and discuss their impact and relevance today. I am Tim Longo, and I'm joined, as always, by a man who is having a happy birthday to you.
Oh God,
happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to... That's
Bastard.
Happy birthday to you.
Thank you.
Brett.
Thank you very much.
Brett is gracious enough to record on his birthday. A very unique, man. It might be the only time we ever do this. So,
well, I don't know. It could happen with yours sometime. It'll be a while before mine comes around again, but yeah
that's true. Happen. Just I think the stars aligned. We needed to do it today.
Not only that, it is the date that Kingdom Hearts 3 is releasing in North America.
Today is
the day.
Funny.
I thought it was Friday. It came out in Japan on Friday. I misunderstood. Because I was
happy
like,
birthday.
Oh, it's weird. It's coming out on Friday. And happy birthday, and Kingdom Hearts 3 is out. Which is good because I bought it for myself for a birthday gift.
Oh, how adorable.
Including all of the other games.
Wait, what? What do you mean by that?
You can buy an all-in-one, like all of the games, remastered for PlayStation 4.
Not like just the main ones. Not like all the weird.
There are like 9 games or something in this bundle, plus Kingdom Hearts 3.
All available on PlayStation 4?
All available on PlayStation 4. So it's like the DS one has been remastered at some point, and there's like some prologue thing that's 2.8. Like, I'm not even going to get into, like, because I don't actually honestly understand any of this.
No. But this seems like perfect for you.
Well, it's where we need to get into the elephant in the room, because I have my response. Yeah. So,
okay, you want to start there?
I'm going to start there because now that I've said, I've bought all this crap now.
Well, I got to start though. I have to
you
start.
Should start because Sunday, what did you text to me to say?
I texted Brett that I think this game might be bad. It's like, I was just like, this is a bad game.
And I was like, who chose this game?
Yeah, and you were like, who's the idiot that chose the game? And then because it's JRPG, I always blame Brett in my head, and then he always reminds me it was my idea. So I'm coming around some, but I still stand by the question to myself when I was playing in this last session, and I'm sure the podcast audience is yelling at me right now, and I'm crushing dreams or what have you, but I'm trying to look at it objectively.
Well, I want to get at why, and I also want to know where you were when you said that, because I think when I was where you were when you said that, I was thinking the same thing. And in fact, I wrote about this some years ago on my blog when I played it, and was like, this game is really frustrating and bad. Like, why did they make the game the way they made it? Mm-hmm. And now here I am, having bought like 10 games worth of this thing. And
are you sure you're not just convincing yourself that because you just bought 10 games?
No, I bought them because I convinced myself of that, and I'll get to how I did that and how I came around on it, because I think there's something there. Yeah. But I want to hear from you, like, where you were,
so
and what had led you to make that statement.
I think the crux of it was really the deep forest.
And that's exactly where I was.
Yeah, that's a bad level. That's a bad world.
So why is it a bad world?
Well, so there's one very obvious thing, which I would imagine even the fans of the franchise would agree with. I can't imagine people don't, see through this. But the structural aspect and the linear flow of the world is, the worst example of backtracking I've ever seen. Mm-hmm. That combined with one-off mechanics, like everything from the vines to the confusing nature of the flow of the world itself, and kind of like how things connect. And then falling down, going all the way back down, which they repeat that theme a few times. I do that in the Agrabah as well, in the Cave of Wonders. So it's like you put all this stuff together, and then it's kind of the triggering, which we talked a little bit about the first episode, the triggering of the linear steps based on, it's all event-based order of operations. So, but without clear messaging and telegraphing that that's the case. So you will pass a certain thing, something will happen, and then you have to go back to another location to trigger the next step, but you
Right.
have
You have
no
to go to
idea
the
that
camp.
that's the
You have to go to
case.
the tent. You have to go to the cliffs, and you don't
Yeah.
know. Yeah.
No,
So my
yeah,
follow-up question though is, what's your relationship with Tarzan the film?
0.
Exactly.
So you think it's related to
I
that
think
mainly?
that is a big part of it, because I actually haven't seen that one. It might be the only.
I've seen it once.
I haven't even seen it once. I can remember Chris Corey being in my office. Chris Corey was the lead programmer on Starfighter, and he and I shared an office. And I can remember somebody coming in, and they were really frustrated that when they came out of Tarzan the movie, they were being sold the merchandise. And Chris was like, "Well, you have to understand, Disney's a merchandising company." And that person was like, "Yes, but I hate that, and I don't want to be a part of it. I don't like that."
But yet
And
I
I
worked for
remember,
LucasArts.
yeah, well, and at the time, I remember thinking, yeah, I mean, I'm probably not going to see Tarzan, because at that point, I only had one child, and he was far too young, if I
Yeah.
even had that child. I can't remember when Tarzan came out versus Luke's birth, but it was like around the same time. And I was like, oh, no way I'm going to this movie. And it just never came up again. And the same with like Hercules. I've seen once with the kids, like we got a gift of
That's
that.
one I have not seen. I haven't seen
Yeah.
Hercules,
And,
nor like
and,
the Hunchback of Notre Dame. Yeah.
and I haven't seen that one ever. Like, and I look at those and I'm like, and I have seen Beauty and the Beast. I saw that in the theater. I saw Aladdin in the theater, because that was kind of the resurgence of Disney, and I wanted to see what that was all about. But then I lost track. I didn't have young children. I was entering the workforce. Then I had very young children, so it was just like it didn't fit for me. And so I sort of feel like, design wise, if I were trying to design a game that makes you feel like you're in these Disney worlds, I would probably not necessarily telegraph exactly where to go, because part of the fun for me of being in Monstro, which I really like, is how much it represents the Monstro world that I remember from when I saw it, or could imagine from when I saw it. And I'm like, I'm fine just to wander around in that, and I actually don't really care that I'm not advancing it super well. And at a certain point, I'm like, well, I'm playing for this podcast, I got to get it done. But since I have no connection with Tarzan, rather, with Deep Jungle, that one really ticks me off, because I'm like, I don't care about any of this, and it's really faithful. I mean, it looks really good, right? Compare, at least from what I remember. I mean, Tarzan's actually a pretty good model. I hate
It's
almost
impressive
everything.
for PlayStation 2. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it looks great. There's Jane. She's great. I love Minnie Driver. I wish she was voicing it, but it's just like, but I have no connection with any of those characters, and I don't know. I'm actually not a fan of Rice Burroughs generally, because of his racism, basically. And Tarzan stories are really particularly bad at that. But it's just like, and actually, Deep Jungle never recurs, I don't think, in the series, because they have to also deal with the estate whenever they license.
Oh
that.
yeah, I noticed that in the opening
It's in the
title
opening credits.
screen. Yeah. I mean,
but I have no connection with that. I have a very little connection with Agrabah, although I hate that one a lot less. But by the time I got to Agrabah, I had learned from Deep Jungle that my way to advance the story is, the story's not advancing. I just have to go around to all the places I've been.
Yeah, I mean, I learned that as well, but I feel like I learned it the hard way. Now the funny thing is, with Agrabah, I actually is opposite for me, because I actually do have a connection to Aladdin. I liked that movie when it came out. I believe Jen and I might have gone to see it on a date night or something. So we kind of have a little bit of an affinity for it. Leah wasn't around at the time, and of course, and so yeah, I mean, I actually enjoyed, other than the bad level design there as well, just breaking rules that I just don't think you can break anymore. I definitely liked being in the world. Mainly, I guess, up top in Agrabah itself. The Cave of Wonders was generally fine with its level design. But to your point, like, I think I get what you mean when it comes to just kind of living and being in the space, and enjoying being in a three-dimensional version of what you remember fondly from the films, or a film in Pinocchio's case for you as one example. The thing that I just can't forgive though is, the sense being around and not having everything kind of force fed to you is fine. However, there are no supporting systems related to that at all. There's no, like, you can't even tell what room you're in. There's no map or anything, right? So
Right.
even if I mean, unless they are expecting you, well, okay, I haven't looked to see what the manual has to offer, but I'm guessing the manual doesn't have a map of every world.
I don't
Um,
believe so.
but but
I haven't looked either, but
yeah, I
I
mean,
don't.
I always have to remember that for these older games. There could be things that we're frustrated about would be in the manual sometimes. But anyway,
This was also a period when they were pushing the Prima Strategy
strategy
Guide or
guides,
whatever.
yeah,
So
could be a strategy guide strategy, for sure. But do you know what I mean? Like when it comes to that sense of like, just figure it out. You want to support that mentality with some systems, even if they're minimal. Uh, and I just feel like it's so slim that I end up just getting frustrated, even in the places that I like. Right? They break some of their own rules when it comes to doors that are blocked, and then they're unblocked, and they don't tell you that they were unblocked. So sort of things like that that just it's again feels very level designery, scripty. This is just the logic of the level, figure it out, kind of. Versus just living in the space. All that being said, to your point of just the sort of nostalgia of it and the inner conflict I'm having with this game right now, because I'm on the last boss of Monstro, so I'm almost caught up. Is I kind of, the way I would summarize it is I do enjoy being in the game. Like, it's growing on me, and this concept of bouncing around to all these worlds and this very loose meta structure of the story, and kind of I've no idea what the heck's going on. But when when the villains show up, these really famous villains are, and there's this council of villains that all seem to be working together in some way, and all these cameos are just really delightful. And then we were talking pre-show a little bit, though we haven't really delved. We'll probably talk more about it in the future. 100 Acre Wood,
mm-hmm.
with Winnie the Pooh and the pages. Like, I went just to check out the first page, and that was delightful. I mean, it's just amazing. I couldn't believe it. We were
That
walking
was
around.
another one I hadn't seen as a kid, but that I watched a ton when my boys were little.
Oh yeah, no, I
So
had both.
that is one when I played this the first time. That was the point in that playthrough where I was like, the whole game could have just been this. Like, I was so
Yeah,
enthralled with the 100 Acre Wood, and I
yeah,
haven't gone back there yet because I kind of want to get all the bits and have it all at once, and just like spend a couple of hours on a stream just doing the 100 Acre Wood, because I totally, like, that is the one movie that my boys would watch again, other than other ones that I liked, which were mostly Pixar. But they would watch those things again and again and again. They would
yeah.
watch 100 Acre Wood so much. I mean, we watched that a lot of times, and it is so delightful, right? I mean, it's just. Um, on the other hand, it also, like, it bothers me that that's the one IP that somehow Disney has co-opted from the past and will never be public domain now. It's like, come
Mm.
on, it's I don't know. I have this really conflicted feeling about Disney,
Oh
because
yeah, for
I
sure.
have tons of nostalgia for especially the animated films, and the early ones. I mean, the ones from the 50s, the 40s, 50s, 60s, and because those are the ones that were replaying in the 70s. And um, I even, and it's horrible to say this, I even have a soft spot for, like, Song of the South, which you literally cannot get anymore.
Hmm.
I don't know if you remember that, but that's the one
Yeah,
with, like,
yeah,
Brer
yeah,
Rabbit and Brer Fox,
yeah.
um, and at the time I had no concept, as a New Hampshire kid, you know, of just how bad that was,
Well, I
but
mean, we're even conflicted when we go to Disneyland and ride Splash Mountain. 'Cause it's like, which is based on that.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, is it?
Yeah,
Okay, yeah, I
dude.
didn't know that.
Right, you're following Brer Rabbit and Fox throughout the
I
whole,
don't
and
think
Bear.
I've been on Splash Mountain, so
It's a log ride, but
yeah,
you know
yeah,
the music's playing. They're not singing the lyrics,
right.
but the undertones are. If you think too hard about it, you're going to be like, So
Yeah, like,
yeah,
yeah.
it is,
Oh,
but
wow,
it
I
is.
didn't know
It's
that.
an IP company, right? They are. That is their thing. They create and control IPs, and I mean, we're getting a little bit off topic, but with Mary Poppins Return coming out, right, or just having come out, they conveniently waited for that to come out after she had passed, when we notoriously know that she and Disney did not get along, right?
Oh, I
Because
didn't know that.
no,
What
the she did not.
Travers or whatever
Yeah,
is
she
their next
hated the
name.
first movie, and there's that
Really?
not a documentary. There's that dramatization of Tom Hanks playing Walt Disney, and her name's
Emma
escaping.
Thompson, right?
Emma Thompson's playing Travers, and it's kind of about that relationship, and they kind of spin it to be kind of a quaint relationship, but it was not, as
It
far
was
as I
not.
understand.
No, that I guess I did know, and I never really connected that together. Like when the movie came out, I remember thinking, "Oh, here's a well, for lack of a better word, but it's not the right word, but a whitewash basically of this relationship." And then
Yeah.
there was similarly like a Hitchcock. There were Hitchcock movies around the same time, and one of them was kind of more accurate, and the other one was kind of like less, less so. Yeah. Anyway, we're way off topic now.
But
Um,
anyway, yes,
yeah,
it's
yeah, it bugs me. Like that's always a thing that sticks in my craw about Disney. But at the same time, there is a there is a part somewhere in this blackened heart. This there's still a heart in this heartless, and
yeah, I'm not so sure, but I'll let you.
give it to me today. My
Okay.
birthday.
Happy
Yeah.
birthday. Your
Um,
present is, yeah, okay.
that still goes for some of those worlds, and I realize that the worlds that I just am frustrated and annoyed with are the ones I don't have any connection to.
Yeah.
And in the stream there were people who were saying, look, this is definitely the roughest one, the deep
Mm,
jungle in particular. It's just because of some of the things you mentioned, like the swinging around on the vines. There was a part I finally like. It took me 3 times of swinging across this area and then going, oh shoot, I didn't want to swing across. The thing up was right there, but it's not highlighted in any way. It's very hard to see. You're facing the opposite direction. It's like
no.
if you want to get to the treehouse, it's actually fairly easy. But if you forget that the vine is right there where you start, you're gonna swing across and be like, "Where do I go now?" And then it's too late, and now you have to start over. So yeah, there are some structural problems up there. But like being around the camp and then having that cave and then having that fight with that chameleon thing, which I don't even know, is that in the movie? Who knows?
I
That
don't
is sort.
remember that.
I
No.
can't imagine. I think that's a heartless thing. Um, and then kind of jumping over and going into his waterfall. I'm like, if I had seen this movie, I could see all of that working for me and forgiving everything else a lot more than I did, like I do in Monstro. Like, yeah, the platforming in there is terrible. The platforming generally is pretty terrible, and or even Agrabah, like the platforming getting around in those areas is not great. Um, there's definitely weird like, wait a minute, I have to go down here. I have to fall and then swim this direction to get into this secret room or whatever it's
Oh,
called. And
down, yeah, in the
yeah,
yeah,
down
that
below. I mean, there's a
that
lot
stuff's
of
not good.
weird stuff. Yeah. And it's just like, I totally get, like, as designers and game developers, it's like, yeah, we would never do this today. Um, and then on the other hand, I'm like, but I, if I get to be in these worlds, I forgive so much. And I finally realized that I'm just forgiving so much more in the worlds that I have a connection to,
Yeah.
than I am in the earlier worlds where I'm like, why would we have this world? I don't care about this world. But of
Yeah.
course, if you were 12 or 15 or whatever in, well, teenagers had everything. But if you were 12 when this game came out, those would be the ones that you saw a million times when you were a kid. And you'd be fine with it. Like, who cares? Like, I don't care. I don't know what to do next. I'm running around in the jungle with Tarzan, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, but I mean, we also know that they generally have tried to time the properties that are in the game with stuff that is fairly relevant and fresh, right? Because we know
yeah,
Tarzan
yeah.
and Hercules were around the time, so kids picking this game up, most likely had seen those. So playing them after the fact for us is definitely a little. I guess they just maybe aren't as timeless in that regard, right? I don't know the list um, for 3. The weird thing about 3 though is that it's taken forever to make
to
it,
make it.
right.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's the timing of the ones they chose. Like I know that Big Hero 6 is in it, right?
yes.
And so that is not a new movie. But they probably were
Frozen's
developing
in
it.
it. Monstropolis is in it. Toy Story is in it.
Okay. Yeah, some of those are pretty timeless though and have had sequels. Frozen
Yeah,
is kind of in the Princess canon in a way, so it's kind of going to live on
yeah.
forever. But
She's probably one of the princesses. I think Tangled is in it. I know Tangled is in it.
yeah,
That
yeah.
so that
So it's
one's
a lot
going
of
back a ways.
CG
You know,
stuff. Yeah, that's
yeah.
true. Um, yeah, so maybe they just chose some weird ones. I guess.
Oh, and Pirates is in it. The Pirates franchise, Pirates
Oh,
of the
weird.
Caribbean. Yeah,
That was actually a pretty good. Speaking of Disney, that was a pretty good play set with Disney Infinity. By the way, I don't know if you played any of that, but
I've not, but it will come up in feedback.
there's multiple times when I thought about that game because I actually really like Disney Infinity for many reasons. But yeah, it's made. The reason I bring up Disney Infinity is it something that's kind of dawned on me while I'm playing this is it feels like some JRPG developers decided they wanted to make a new. They wanted to kind of start getting into some different spaces when it comes to linear level design and action oriented mechanics, and they just aren't used to that. They
Yeah,
haven't done a lot of iterative game development on that kind of stuff, and so they're kind of out of their element. So they're sort of clumsily putting this hybrid genre together, and it's just not landing for me.
yeah,
Because I can see where they want to go and why they want to go. We can talk about combat in a bit, but why they may want to go in this direction. But it's just clumsy. And the properties are truly what's keeping me going. And some of the cameos from Final Fantasy, or from Square, I guess. Maybe it's not just Final Fantasy, but
I think it's
um,
just Final Fantasy,
just
but
Final
I don't.
Fantasy.
Yeah, I don't know all of the. I'd have to
Yeah,
go
of
back
course.
and
So
I'd
those
have to
aren't
look to the
landing.
credits and be like, yeah, those don't land for you at all because you haven't played 7 or 8. You know, and it's just, yeah. I mean, it's funny because I had 2 problems. Well, I had 3 problems. I had 3 big problems when I played this game the first time. One was I wanted to play as the Disney characters because I don't care about Sora. I still don't care about Sora. That I don't know that that's ever going to change. Although now I have 10 games to prove me wrong, so we'll
Oh
see.
my god, I cannot wait to see.
But yeah, but my reaction to Sora has always been like, oh, okay, here's a even blander Final Fantasy character that I just can't care about. I mean, he's even on an island with other characters I know. It's just like, ugh, okay, whatever. That's fine. Um, I don't normally care a lot about Final Fantasy protagonists, so it's like, okay, I guess that's fine. Like, I I,
If
I like the stories, but I don't feel they are.
hmm, no,
There's something about the characters that don't generally connect with me.
yeah,
I don't know what that is, but and I'd have to sort of sit down and really play back through some and be like, why does this not work for me? Actually, there's often some cultural divides because I recently finished 13-2, and I was really frustrated that we had this female character who had been in 13 that should be my character that I want to identify so much with, and they throw in this male character who I don't care about at all. And I'm just like, why did you do that? And like she defers to him. There's a lot of like cultural issues.
mm,
So
yeah.
it's just like,
Well,
I
they
want
I've
her to be the hero. I want her to get all the cool stuff and all the time and not suck up to the men in her life. It's like when Metroid was done for the Wii, and they definitely not Metroid Prime, but the new Metroid, Other M, and
Other
it was
M,
like
yeah,
Samus was like, oh, this isn't the strong female character I thought I was playing all these years. Who the hell is this?
yeah,
And I feel like that happens a lot in these games where there's something that keeps me at arm's length. um, So I wanted.
What
So
it,
that was one. That was one concern. Another
well,
concern was like leveling characters. I'm like,
hmm,
I misunderstood, and somebody explained to this. Let me explain this to me in stream. So thank you. I think it was Bidoof. It may not have been though. There was somebody else who was new. Anyway, all the characters are leveling basically at the same time.
whether
So
they're in
that
your party or not.
whether they're in your party or not. So like while you're on,
Oh,
um, while you're in Monstro, Tarzan and Aladdin are still leveling up.
wait, what? You mean?
So you
Do I
go
see?
back there,
You,
and if you put them in your party, they're equivalent level to
oh,
you or
but
something
you
like
don't
that.
like see their. You don't see the
No,
toast.
you don't see them. Yeah, you don't
Yeah,
get the information that they have leveled up or whatever, but they are. And
yeah.
so I really found that frustrating because I remember thinking, well, I want to have these Disney characters in my party. I mean,
So you're swapping a lot.
but it's like, but then I'm always leaving Donald out. And is he going to be under leveled like at the end of the game? Because this is a Japanese role playing game, right? I mean, going to need my characters to be leveled up. And I just totally missed the fact that actually they just level equally.
Not
And
only
Donald's
that,
like,
but you need them for the Trinity. So
and you need him for that too. Yeah.
I
So there is
hate.
that too. That, yeah, that also works against it. That I do also find that frustrating. It's like, I don't want, I want to have, the cool new character. I want to be that cool new character. I
Yeah.
understand production wise why you might not do that because it's maybe you have to have lots of different mechanics, especially with somebody like Tarzan who moves very differently and things like that. But it was a thing that I wanted. And then we'll talk about the last thing that drove me crazy when we get there, which is the end of the game. So,
Mm. Well, yeah, I guess it's the leveling doesn't seem to matter to me so far too, right? I don't know, it just feels
then
like
the leveling system must be perfect. It's matching you up with the level of difficulty at all times.
I guess so, but also and this is kind of I guess one of the other topics that we were going to maybe touch on a bit, and we don't have to go too deeply, but when I level a character, I want to be excited about that moment, and often it's happening in the middle of this real time combat, and I don't really have that moment of sort of reward once they level. I mean, they could level a couple times in a world, and I wouldn't. It doesn't dawn on me to go back and do anything about that. So I guess the main thing you have to do is the ability stuff, as far as I can tell. Um, but if it's all perfectly balanced and and I'm not hitting any, I mean, I guess I'm kind of at a wall now with this boss I'm on currently, so maybe I should go and grind or something. But
Now, are you ever? So the other part of this was the equipment. Are you
yeah,
ever like switching out your keyblade and stuff like that?
I have switched some stuff out, but I haven't paid too much detailed attention to it. I guess I should. Um, but from what I've fooled around with, it doesn't seem to even make that much of a difference. But I guess I just haven't really I haven't identified it. I feel like in Final Fantasy IX, which is my best point of comparison so far, there were some bosses that you hit in that game where it's very clear you have to figure out how to play this game to
Yeah,
progress, whether it be the elemental or whatever you call it, the different counters, and
yeah.
you need the right equipment, or you need to be at a certain level. And here I'm just kind of playing, I'm just mashing and going through things, and I've definitely died a few times and had to restart, but I can spam through using potions or ether or something, or using my spells and stuff. And so I don't know. It's just a very odd
So did
RPG
you did
experience.
Olympus and you did Cerberus?
Yeah. Uh huh.
And
Well,
did you have trouble with Cerberus?
no, not really.
Huh,
I don't.
man, because
Yeah.
that one was really tough for me. I was playing through that going, Tim's gonna hate me, Tim's gonna hate me, Tim's gonna hate me, and then I remembered, oh, I'm gonna hate Tim, I'm gonna hate Tim.
I
Um,
think I did
because
on my
that
second try.
Oh wow, yeah, that one took me a number of tries. I was streaming and that does weird things with difficulty because pay attention to the stream a bit, like, so
Mm-hmm.
there are kind of weird things that happen there, but that was one that I just could not find the rhythm and like what to do. And at a certain point I just had to be like, okay, heads down. I'm actually now just going to focus on this and do it and get it done. But that was the one that I was like, oh man, Tim might not get past this at all.
Yeah.
But whatever. I mean, you must have read that one well enough that you were like, oh, I see what to do. Whereas I just
Well,
didn't.
I think mainly it's for that one. It was mainly avoidance was the only thing I really had to do. But I feel like when in doubt, you just button mash through it and do lock on so you know where to hit. And I feel like most of the bosses have been like that, which has kind of been disappointing because I've wanted. I think and maybe I'm there with this boss in Monstro, but I feel like I've been wanting that a little bit of that Final Fantasy feel that I got from 9, where I have to kind of figure out the trick. I have to figure out what's going on, but I haven't felt that with any of them really.
Yeah, I don't
That
think
there
you're
is a trick.
gonna. I don't think you're gonna. Like, I don't remember that being a thing in this game very much.
Yeah.
We and I guess we can talk a little bit about the combat just generally because we're kind of there. The
Yeah.
combat is very thin. There is, so in later games and maybe even one of the remixes of this game, which is what they call them when they remake them or remaster them, they do change some things up. They do fix things that are blatantly bad, like the black fruit that you can't even lock onto in Deep Jungle. They fix that stuff. They fix the camera control, etc.
Oh, the camera's so bad.
Yeah, the camera's not good. Yeah,
It's
the
maybe the biggest.
L2R2 is bad.
Yeah, it's maybe the biggest problem.
Yeah, that's a throwback to earlier Final Fantasies and earlier JRPGs and really throws back to like before we had 2 sticks, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
really what it comes
Yeah,
from.
for sure. No,
It's
I'm
terrible.
definitely.
It's terrible, but it's there. That's why it's there. Um, but there are playthrough styles which involve having 0 XP, which means you don't get the level, and the game ends up being a lot more like Dark Souls at that point. Because so
Wait,
I
what?
guess
How do you?
in later versions of the game you can equip a skill
Uh-huh.
which is 0 XP. So you don't level up.
Huh.
You get no experience points. And I didn't look into this very much, but I did actually hear it in the stream, and actually it was touched on in Tim Rogers's review on Kotaku, which I would recommend people of Kingdom Hearts 3. I would recommend people read because I actually think it's kind of a transcendent review. It's like the criticism itself is a piece of art.
Huh.
He imagines his Donald side and his Goofy side in his brain, and how they respond to like all these different things that happen over the course of the game mechanically and stuff. I mean, he picks up on some of the things that we say. I actually took a quote, which was like, on the other hand, some levels ask you to do a menial task, usually find inscrutable item and press a button on it, and then make you do it 2 more times because game designers love 3s. Once would be enough. 0 would be better. That is total truth. Yeah. And in fact, he put game designers love 3s capitalized, capital G, capital D, capital L. Anyway, it's a great review. So I would point people at it. But I hadn't even read this review and had kind of come around to like embracing the Goofy in me of just like the stuff that I like, and actually paying attention more to the combat in order to try to get the tech points, which turns out are really just an XP boost. But I think that is making the game really easy combat wise for me. Like, because I wasn't doing that up to Cerberus, which is where I had the most difficult time I've had in the game. And since then, it's been smooth sailing. I might have died once or twice since then, but not frequently. It's just kind of like, oh, I'm not really paying attention. And, I get too much into the stream part of it and the chatting with people part of it and kind of lose track of the combat. But for the most part, after that, it's been smooth sailing. And I think part of it is that I'm actually actively trying to read the enemies and respond to like, oh, it's about to do this thing, you know. And even in Deep Jungle, I was starting to do that with the monkeys, and there's a lot of them, and they have 3 attacks or whatever. And I was trying to like, oh, okay, let me try to read the tell for that attack. And I think there's stuff there in the combat, but none of it is really well signaled. And I think that this game fell in that gray area of development where we hadn't learned to teach people that stuff. And their fidelity wasn't there that it telegraphs well enough. Especially in these games where the rendering has to be pretty generic. It has to handle a lot of different types of stuff. I don't mean that the rendering look is generic. I just mean that from an engine perspective, it has to handle a lot of different situations. And when you have to do that, it limits what you can do, especially on hardware that's limited. So you have to really be like, we have to handle the general case, which is like any different sort of thing that we could have. And so maybe we have a little less memory for the animation that we might be able to telegraph better, or even just the textural stuff that you could read, you know, in the models that would make it easier to tell when this thing is happening, or what have you. So I don't know which problem it is, because I haven't gotten to that far, but like, you know, your Dark Souls and Demon Souls, they have the fidelity that you can actually, animation wise, you can read that these things are happening. Even if they're happening quickly, you can read them. And I think that this game suffers in that it doesn't have that yet. But I actually think that the combat has a lot of that stuff in it. It's just much harder to read just because of fidelity. And it's also lower res, etc. So, you know.
Well, I think fidelity, but I think camera is critical to that.
And
too.
the camera's bad. Yeah,
Yeah, I
no
mean,
argument there.
You know, that can be a make or break for action oriented combat like this. So
yeah, because you lock onto something, it jumps over your head, and now I guess I wait for the camera to move around, and etc. Yeah,
I mean, bad. The enemy AI design and the camera design are not in parity, and so you can lock on to any of the enemies, but you're surrounded 360, so you can't see telegraphing, and the audio for the telegraphing isn't great either. So you know, you can focus on one enemy at a time, but unless you're in a boss battle, you're never alone with one enemy. So
yeah, no, that's true. Yeah.
So it's just kind of a combo of things, but I can appreciate if there's some depth in there that I just haven't found yet. I think the interesting reason that we always bring up Dark Souls is that, you know, from my limited understanding, you know, that's a game that forces you to learn what's going on. And this game so far has not forced me to do that. I've been able to button mash through it and I haven't needed to, you know, especially because I don't feel like leveling and extra XP is that necessary for me right now, because I haven't hit any of those walls. And so I'm not, you know, I'm just not incentivized to actually go deeper into it. But I'm a self-admitted, you know, min-maxer. So like there is going deeper like you're doing for the joy of just getting into it because you enjoy playing the game. And for me, I'm going to do what I need to do to, you know, to get what I want to do. Yeah. So I'll invest next play session. I'll investigate that. And I do need to figure out this boss anyway. So maybe the parrying is just, you're just attacking at the right time.
You're just attacking at the right time. Yeah. That's and it's, and every, I mean, the other issue there is that something like Dark Souls does, you spend a lot more time with any individual enemy, and there are more mechanics around just like circling that thing, you know, because the camera's so bad here. You always just want to face the damn thing and not, you don't want to move in any weird way that's going to make it difficult for you to read what's going on, because you might have a hard time finding that thing again. And that's just an unfortunate, the camera's bad. There's just no getting around that. So, you know, and that is a thing that in the remakes, like I said, that they fixed. So I think they knew that. You know, I think that it was my early lament in this game, is like, oh yeah, this is a game that just could feel a lot better in its combat. And if combat's going to be so central to the experience, I do wish that they had spent more on the feel of the combat, like that you felt like that the parries mattered, that you felt like anything you did mattered, and that you could, you know, not just button mash your way through. But, you know, on the other hand, if they're looking to bring in people who don't normally, well, there's a number of reasons. I mean, it could be that they're not experienced making this sort of thing. Although action RPGs have been made at Square in the past, so it's not like it's new to them entirely. Vagrant Story came up recently as a discussion point. That's a PS1 title, great action RPG. And it's like, well, okay, so maybe that's not it. I mean, maybe they're just, they want it to be possible to do because they're doing this with a Disney game, and so maybe they're bringing in some Disney people who don't normally play this sort of thing. Maybe that's it. Like, I don't know really where it comes from. Or maybe it's just the JRPG thing is, if you fail a lot and just keep grinding, you'll be over leveled a bit, and it actually won't matter where you are compared to what you're fighting. So there's a lot of factors that could be factoring into that. So
yeah, I wish that I was feeling the need to delve into all of the subsystems, like the abilities, which I still don't quite get. Equipment I haven't dabbled with very much, like we said. So, I just probably need to spend some time with that and figure out what it's all about. But it's definitely keeping me going, just being in these places. We didn't talk too much about Wonderland because I hadn't finished it in the previous episode.
Oh yeah, right.
But though definitely confusing and not great message, sort of visual language for how to navigate that forest area. I forget what it was called, the lily pad forest or something, or lotus forest.
Yes.
But the bizarre room I really loved. I loved coming in and out of that room from different directions.
That was neat. Yep.
And I do have some affinity for Alice in Wonderland, so it was cool to kind of feel like that was their take on it, So I actually was very memorable. Some interesting stuff going on there. But other than the Winnie the Pooh moment, which is my favorite so far, delivering that book to that mysterious cave in Traverse Town and not knowing who's there, and then when you get there, and it's abandoned and all run down, and then Merlin shows up.
Yeah.
That was a cool moment. And it was kind of like Jiminy Cricket too, of like this interesting cameo, kind of important character who now you're interacting with, and everyone's kind of on the case with this whole storyline because all the worlds are disappearing and stuff. So that was a cool moment too. I loved that one.
Yeah, I mean, and the interesting thing I think going forward with that stuff is that they start retconning like why these people are there, because that means their worlds were destroyed too. That's why they're there. Right. So like Merlin's world was destroyed, so I guess that's Camelot, and then Cinderella's world was destroyed. I think at least Cinderella's world turns up later. I'm not sure about the Sword and the Stone.
Well, you have to keep us posted.
I will let you know.
Your 100 of hours.
I will probably stream the hundreds of hours, but I'm gonna like dole it out a bit at a time. So, all right, let's take a as I choke to death. Let's take a quick break, and we'll come back with a little feedback. And I guess it'd be more accurate to call it a wrapping review.
Oh no.
Welcome back from the break. We have a bit of feedback this time, and as I teased before the break, a wrapping review which came in through the iTunes store, at this time from Denmark. I actually had a couple things I wanted to throw out there. One was Cameron Daxon, who had written to us before about his work with Boss Key Books. You may remember that a while back, Tim. Sent in a thing that he had written for Kotaku as part of their Talk Amongst Yourselves sort of community-facing blogging, I guess, about re-encountering his notes from Pokemon and like his favorite teams. I tweeted it out on the account, which is Twitter at Dev Game Club, and I just wanted to mention it because I had said to him, we probably won't read the email, but I will at least mention that. So look for that link in the show notes. Second, here's a snippet from Tim Dooley, who sent an email with a bunch of other stuff. He's like, don't read this on the podcast. But he did also say, and this was touching on last time, I would note that Kingdom Hearts' marriage of Disney and Square's properties is less surprising if you remember that the United States occupied Japan during the early heyday of Disney. It may be credibly argued that we would have neither anime nor video games without the introduction of Disney during the occupation. So I had not really ever thought about world history in connection with Disney and Japan, but there's definitely an argument to be made there, and I thought it was worth at least mentioning. Oh yeah, I never even thought to connect that, and there might be some stuff too with this sort of resurgence of Disney and maybe becoming more of a global company in the 90s and things like that. I think there are probably historical reasons why Disney connected with the sort of execs and creative folks at Square at the time.
Square, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know, but when he had written that in, I was like, oh, of course, like we were there in the late 40s and into the early 50s, and of course we maintained some kind of presence in the area always. So yeah, maybe RGI's helped bring that over there. And it is something that we talked about last time, is like, I don't really know what the connection is there. But that was a credible argument to me as well. So I thank Tim Dooley for sending that in. But anyway, let's get to the longer bits of email. You have our last bit of Pokemon, I think, from Bobby Oster.
Okay, Pokemon feedback is the subject from Bobby Oster. Hey, Brett and Tim, I was listening to the great Pokemon podcast series and really honed in on the design discussion during the bonus episode around innovations to improve on the experience of type/element weakness lookups that require checking reference tables outside of the game. I'm currently playing Persona 5, which is a JRPG that shares a lot of similarities with Pokemon and likely influenced it and was influenced by it. The Megami Tensei series it belongs to dates back to 1987 and shares the mechanic of having creatures with levels, stats, and abilities that grow over time, coupled with turn-based combat and around elemental affinities. Turn-based combat around elemental affinities and stat buff debuffs. Here are a couple design implementations they've done to improve the formula. The first one, all strength plus weakness versus types is marked with a question mark when you first encounter an enemy. As you discover how the attack affected, it uncovers that information for future reference. That's pretty cool. Number two, taking the previous point one step further, there's a button that lets you automatically search through your party to pre-select a known weakness for the selected enemy. This is perhaps the greatest time-saving innovation that makes battles more strategic and versus tactical. This feature is so well built that it will even recommend switching characters to bring in someone who happens to have a strong attack versus a particular type. I have played these turn-based combat games my whole life, but grew tired of the time-consuming format. These creative design innovations have been able to breathe new life into the genre and keep me engaged with the game. I really enjoyed the podcast. Please keep up the good work. Yeah, give me those. I want both of those in my Pokemon Let's Go, which I'm still playing and still enjoying. Yeah, and they definitely have some more information they're giving in Pokemon Let's Go. But yeah, it's funny that I didn't know that about the Persona games. I've always heard about the Megami Tensei stuff, and I guess I didn't realize there was sort of a creature element to that.
I mean, the persona that it's talking about, those personas are
the creature,
are basically your creatures, right? Those are the things that basically fight, and those are the abilities that you have that you fight with. So it's not quite like you go out and find them and catch them, but so that those games have there's a part when you're in the real world and you're a high school kid going to high school every day, or the Japanese equivalent.
I know roughly. And
right in that you are making relationships in that part of the game that strengthen these personas of your own. So you meet some character who's like a nerd or whatever, and having this relationship with this nerd gives you this magician component, as well as capturing and actually making these complicated personas that you can merge. There's a whole set of mechanics that are around it. It's a little different from Evolution, but you can think of it as pretty much the same thing. You get them from defeating things and whatever. There's no like pure capture mechanic, but you strengthen your bonds with those different ones, and it basically powers them up and makes you able to make bigger, better ones. And there's a whole host of interesting things going on in the Persona series as far as that goes. But I do love, and I think that goes back at least to Persona 4 and maybe to 3. They didn't suggest personas to use. I don't think directly like, oh, use this because it's good about against whatever. But there was that sort of like, as you learn more, it just tells you it's weak against whatever, once you've learned that well enough. And there were characters who would support characters who would help you learn that information. If the combat went on long enough, it'd be like, oh, they're weak against ice. Use ice, use so-and-so. I think they would even say, use this character that you have, this persona. So I love that series. And I've played 3 and 4, and I have 5 because I buy games long before I actually have time to play them. And so someday I'll play that as well. But I've never played a main series title, the Shin Megami Tensei main series. And there have been numerous people who've sent an email and said, you should really play a base Shin Megami Tensei game. So maybe someday. Maybe next, Tim. What do you think? Oh, no, we'll do Chrono Trigger next and then Shin Megami Tensei right after that. Right? Yeah. You're done with that.
Yeah, we're going to take a break after this one. Yeah. Okay. So there is a side of me that does look forward to Chrono Trigger because it's more traditional JRPG, right? It's turn-based combat.
Yes, and no, just turn-based combat, I believe, but there's also no random battles.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so I'm listening. Okay.
All right, I have another one here. Yeah, I've got one from Warren Linham Church. The subject is question/comment. Howdy, first time, long time. 1, I know the point of the show is to look at classic games, in quotes, which seems to imply to me games that have some kind of quality to them regardless of when they were made, but I have found that I enjoy the discussions about games or parts of games that you guys didn't like. You really seem to dig into the why and nitty-gritty of something that you don't like. I don't know if that's fun for y'all, but I at least appreciate it. 2, how would you go about designing a game where the core mechanic is knucklehead stealth? How would you distinguish that versus something like being really good with sword in Thief? Best, Warren. Yeah, so we'll get to knucklehead stealth in a minute. Give you a moment to reflect. I think the thing with things that we don't enjoy is that, I mean, it immediately puts ourselves into problem solving mode, right? Like, and of course we have the luxury of all kinds of time, and we don't have to actually implement it, right? So we don't have any of the constraints that actual game development faces. So it's really nice to be like armchair design, like, how would I solve this problem? Like we just did about combat a little bit with Kingdom Hearts. How about you on that?
Well, I mean, his question is, do we enjoy that same?
I mean, it was more a comment that he likes it, but I'm curious to ask.
No, I do too. I mean, it's a very, my wife and I talk about this a lot. It's a very double-edged sword because to some degree, it makes me not enjoy playing video games a lot of the time so I do like it from an academic standpoint because I guess I just like that analytical side of my brain, and even from college or whatever, just having that sort of like the deep analytics you can go through on anything. For me, it was theater at the time, right, and still is. And doing that for games is definitely fun for me. But to Brett's point, because I work in the industry and we work in the industry, I always have this nagging thing in the back of my head where I try not to be. I don't know. I just know how hard it is and how much I mess up all the time, and
I'm well aware of how much you mess up.
Yeah, man, I teed that one up. So it's hard to kind of be critical sometimes of things that are really hard problems to solve when I know, how difficult it is and how hard it has been for me to solve problems. And so it is very armchair. I feel like we're just kind of sitting back, leaning back in our chair with our hands behind our head and just kind of like, yeah, these guys didn't know what they were, doing. And it's not fair, but I do love it. I've always loved analyzing, creative works. So
Yeah, well, and it's an important skill for us to have because, of course, when we're working on our own projects, we
yeah, it
hopefully are able
applies.
to also bring that to bear, right?
Totally
Um,
applies day to day. This
yeah,
podcast has weirdly helped me quite a bit in my day to day, to be honest. And
good. I mean,
and
because I'm not with you day to day like I used to be, so it's good that I can have this impact once again.
the team, some members on my team have started to get irritated by me when I bring up the podcast. In fact, we were
Mine,
playing this
mine are
level, and
mine are far too polite to say so, but I'm sure that is also true. Oh,
we
here we
just
go
come it
again.
comes off as know-it-all. It's like, we're playing this classic game and we discovered that blah blah blah, and they're like, oh my gosh,
Yeah, give it a
we gotta,
rest, man.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. As to the second point, as far as knucklehead stealth goes, I, so I've thought about that. So I'll first because you've just heard that right now. I read it earlier today, and I was like, the thing I think that knucklehead stealth wants is fast recovery, like without dying. So it's like you want to have basically. I think what I would do if I had like thief is I would go and say, you know what, I'm going to take thief, but I'm going to give you a lot of get out of jail free gadgets that are silly, that don't make any sense in that world, to be honest, but like would encourage you to like push and do strange things. Like the thing I immediately thought of was like a portable hole, like from Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah,
So you have a portable hole.
like Donut County.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you run through the world. They're all chasing after you. Drop the hole on the ground. You hop into it, and they're all like, What's going on? Where'd he go? He must have come down this way." And so
Yeah,
now you've been allowed to like fail, and then
yeah,
not really have a horrible penalty for it of like, oh, I have to redo all of that stuff or whatever. And those games have save anywhere and things like that. So there are, I mean, you can kind of brute force the stealth even if you want. Like, oh, I did that 30 seconds, fine, I can save now or whatever. But the idea behind Knucklehead stealth is really, I can go and do and just be run through like an idiot once I'm caught. And like try to find places to hide and things like that. And I want to encourage the like, oh, I get to a place where they can't see me just this moment, even though they're coming after me. And so I throw down a portable hole, or I throw up a I don't know I don't know what they call it, but the rope that has no support, but the rope that just goes up to nowhere.
yeah, yeah,
Gadgets like that let you like basically have a one-off. Oh, okay, I'm okay now. Like, okay, yeah, that was stressful.
hmm
And they were chasing me, but I got to a place where they couldn't see me long enough that I could just throw up this rope or throw down this hole and jump in or jump on it. And that's the sort of thing where I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. I mean, it's like safe recovery basically from, oh, I screwed up, but I don't have to redo that thing I just did. I can just continue on from here.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. I mean, uh, definitely, we definitely need to make a knucklehead head stealth game someday.
okay.
I'm liking this idea. Yeah, that's a really good point on just quick recovery. I think the two things that just quickly come to mind, because I've just heard this, so I haven't thought about it too much, but I think embracing the chaos engine aspect of a lot of good stealth games where, there's a lot of different systemic, emergent sim kind of stuff all interacting together, and embracing that and letting it be its thing, and to partnering that with what Brett was saying as far as like quick recovery and get out of jail free cards. You can't do it too much because you want still the stakes to be as high as they can be for a stealth game. But that, I think, in allowing the chaos engine of it, whether that's physics, whether that's systems interacting with each other, materiality and things like that. And then the second thing, which Brett kind of touched on, but I will hit harder, is I think embracing humor, to be honest,
Yeah, yeah.
and not being too
I was
precious
I
with
was
it.
thinking of No One Lives Forever when I came up with those examples because that's a game with good
Yeah,
gadgets. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Embracing humor, and this is actually something that I just, in the hundreds of ideas for games that I would love to make someday, I have a stealth oriented one in my head, and humor is an element of it. Though I had never thought about the knucklehead part of it that we've talked about in the podcast. Um, but to be honest, to some degree, I think that the Hitman reboots 1 and 2 are very close to getting there, because
Mm,
they are starting with 2. I haven't played 2 yet, but as I understand it, there's a lot more humor. There's a
yeah.
lot more embracing the chaos engine of it, and just letting you, like, one of the weapons in Hitman 2 that you can use, which is a good thrown weapon to knock people out, is a muffin. You're in the kitchen of a suburban house, and they have just made a batch of muffins, and apparently you can throw muffins at people and knock them out.
Wow.
And then,
Yeah, yeah.
a mini spoiler, one of the exits, this will probably blow your mind, one of the exits for the Miami racetrack, I heard this all in Giant Bomb, by the way. The Miami racetrack, you can dress up like a flamenco in a big, mascot
Oh yes,
costume.
I've actually seen this. Yeah, I
Okay,
watched
yeah.
Steve Gaynor plays a fair amount of Hitman when he was
Okay,
doing
yeah,
that
yeah. So
stuff.
so there's that one exit where you can go up to the top and find a nest. You know the one I'm talking about?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah,
It's
and
goofy.
then he literally just flies away
Yeah.
from
I
as,
that's an actually really good point, is that the Hitman stuff has been embracing, so that what they don't have as far as the knucklehead goes is like that sense of pure, like, I'm running around like a chicken with my head cut off because
yeah,
things are
it's
after
still,
me.
you're gonna
It's
die
because
fast.
the lethality is too high, I think, for that. But the comedy that they lean into is really good, and I especially love how much they lean into the comedy of the crazy things he will say as he's basically doing the thing that will kill somebody. And they'll
Yeah,
show up and they're like, I'm not feeling so well, and they're like, I'm sure you won't be feeling anything in a minute, or whatever he says, right? He says these like really wry,
yeah,
dry, comic things that as he kills people.
yeah,
And I love that they've embraced that part of it. So that's not really a knucklehead stealth thing, but it is just sort of like, I love to see that comedy and that they're leaning into that, which I think is a real strength of their franchise. Because it's pretty ludicrous, really, when you think about their whole storyline, and like,
hmm,
even going back to Hitman 2, it's pretty silly stuff, but they don't lean
yeah,
into it enough, I don't think. And now they're like, oh yeah, we know what we have, and we're
yeah.
leaning into that kind of the silly aspect of this thing. But yeah, the flamingo is a good example of that. So excellent pull, sir. All right, we have one here from Mikkel, who also gave us our rapping review
Oh
this
man,
time.
he's just bringing it. I notice
Uh,
he's giving me another sentence to read
he
too.
has, yes.
Jeez. Okay, so this is our last mail, and then the review.
Yeah, and then the review. Yeah.
Okay. Subject is on rich lore, Disney in Europe, and Infinity, from Miguel. Hey, Brim and Tet. Okay. I'm pretty sure those are your real names, right? Having completely missed almost all Kingdom Hearts games, I'm delighted to listen to you playing through the first one. So far, the first episode, your bafflement mirrors my own when I tried reading up on the games. To what degree do you think the complicated lore of long running series is a factor in people being able to pick up games? Um, the Halo series has some significant lore, for instance, and if you missed out on the old games, on the old platforms, and aren't keen on getting back onto those machines, is the gameplay and visual style enough to keep you going? The same could be asked of series such as Assassin's Creed, Gears of War, or indeed Kingdom Hearts. What design challenges does working in a rich lore built upon up over multiple games on multiple platforms present to how accessible you might want to make other parts of the game?
All right,
Uh,
let's stop there first, because that's a whole question. Yeah, and I've worked on some lore significant games. Like, I mean, Fallout is not so much lore dependent as tone dependent. So I'm not sure I would put that in this list. There is some kind of base history of like, oh, and China attacked and there was a war with Canada or so. I don't even know. Like you can see how important the lore is to me because I don't even really know. And I'm not the lore guy. I am, but I'm also like, I'm the guy who's just like slowly making my way through the Assassin's Creed series in order. And yes,
Yeah.
I already have I already have Unity, Syndicate, and was it called
Origins.
Origins? Yeah, Origins. And I think I also have Odyssey because I got a new graphics card recently. So I have all these games just lined up, and it's like, oh, when do I feel like playing a new Assassin's Creed game? I'll just like keep
That's
going with the
so much
lore.
time. So
Oh, I
much
know
time.
it's ridiculous. It's absurd, and they've really abandoned the kind of lore stuff that I really liked, which was in the original, and then the um, I guess the
I
series that was two. There were
I
three. There
don't
was a
know.
trilogy
It
of
sounds
2 games.
like it's coming back
Oh, that's good.
based on Odyssey and Origin.
Well, that makes sense because now they're going back further than they were, so it like makes sense
Yeah.
they could bring that stuff back in.
Or at least
But
some of it's coming back. But
yeah, I hated. I mean, I didn't care about Desmond when I first played it, but I was at the end. I was like, I'm kind of interested in like, even though I don't care about Desmond himself, I am really curious about what happens with this whole, ancient whatever and how it's tied into all this stuff. But that doesn't really answer the question. I I don't know how it's a factor. Like you want to have a good hook with those games to do something that like I think that going back to Greece and Egypt has been a good hook for the Assassin's Creed series that can bring people in independent of their whatever overarching abstergo lore that they have. With the Templars and the Assassins and yada yada yada. And I think that that's a thing that you have to maybe keep in mind is like you have to find a way to do that. You have to be bringing them in some way on that. I won't speak to Halo because I haven't played Halo, the most recent Halos. Sorry, sir.
well, I mean, to be honest, I really shouldn't either. But I mean, it's a really interesting and challenging problem in general, just regardless of the franchise we're talking about.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
Because you
because of course I
definitely,
worked on Elder Scrolls as well, which is a very lore heavy game.
yeah, exactly, yeah, and because there's a part of the audience that really is into that and wants it, right, and wants it to progress forward, and you want to have something interesting and cool for those fans. But franchises also are best if they are, trying to grow every year or every version too, right? So you have to balance that stuff in some ways, and some games I think end up heading too heavily into the lore direction exclusively without and then sort of thus alienating people. And I think
Yeah.
all of the examples he's talking about have some of that. I think, I won't get into specifics, but I think that one of the ways that some of the franchises that have dealt with this problem, and obviously part of the challenge is any long running franchise specifically. I think there's a lot of structural things you can do with the game to help sort of service both groups, new players and old players, and so that's where I think some of the interesting things that Assassin's Creed has done, and some of those other games has done that really allow players to kind of opt into stuff and not feel like it's force fed. So I
Yeah.
think that's kind of how the best to deal with some of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I like to borrow from film on this stuff because they sometimes have very long running franchises that like you can look at them and be like, how did they do it? And for me, I can think of a decent positive example in the MCU, the Marvel cinematic stuff, that those films all fairly stand on their own. That each one of them, like any decent comic book, is like, oh, I pick up an arc of a few comic books, and I don't really need to know what happened before, as long as this storyline itself is pretty good. And sure, there's probably stuff in there that if I was looking closely enough at the images and could read between on the lines on some of the things that they were talking about, like I would go, oh, they're calling back to this or that or the other thing. But as a person new to it, I don't notice that I don't know that, and that's really important. And then I look at a series like Saw, which is a horror, kind of a, I don't know, torture porn horror movie series. And that thing is so far up its own behind. It's like each movie has 50% less actual original content because they're constantly calling back and literally showing clips from earlier movies, connecting the dots on all this stuff that happened to make this huge puzzle box of like, I don't care. Like,
No, I didn't know
and oh yeah, it's ridiculous. I mean, I there was a point at which I just like would put them on while I was doing something else. I don't even remember. But I was like, what is this series about? And like the first one, it's like, oh, these two guys and they're like, and the saw is like, there's literally a saw, right? And you have to use that on a body part in order to escape. And that's how the first one is. And then the second one is like, oh, and here's some new characters, but it's also the guy who put them in that situation, but then like those characters are involved somehow. We're calling back to that. And so there's like that layer. And you're like, okay, that's weird. There's like 10% of this movie is the last movie. And then the next one, you're like, oh my God, like all these things are like dotting all these, it's basically the pictures on the, all over your room with the red yarn going in between them after a while, where you're just like, I can't even see the story here anymore. All I'm seeing is that you're trying to make a ton of connections. And if you come in at like Saw 5 or 6 or however many of those movies there are, and I don't think I've seen them all, there's a point at which you're just like, there's no actual new storyline here. There's just a few new torture porn kind of scenes and a ton of red yarn. And that's not serving anyone, that you're losing that franchise at that point. And that's where you kind of go and you're like, well, let's reboot it. That's what Hollywood does at that point, is like, well, I think there's something core good here. Let's figure out how to reboot it. And of course that's what they did with that franchise. So, anyway, let's continue with Mikkel's mail.
I also want to chime in about where Disney characters from. In Europe in general, Mickey, Donald, and Goofy are very central to many people's relationship to Disney, since they are stars in comic books read widely among children in the most Western European countries, particularly in Scandinavia and Italy, as far as I know. I'd go so far as to argue that especially in Europeans 30 years or older, who were not as saturated with home media as younger people, comics were the main way they interacted with the Disney brand in their formative childhood years. Hence, the choice of those protagonists might also be a way into the European market. Sadly, I have no idea if this is relevant to the Japanese market as well. It's good to know. It's interesting to know.
Yeah.
I did not know about that per se.
Yeah, I mean, I'm aware of like Scrooge McDuck, and there were comic books around that, but I do vaguely have an idea that like Mickey and Donald and Goofy and those were parts of comic books, but it wasn't part of my introduction to those characters. I think for me that would go like to not quite my father's generation but like to my uncle's generation. My father's brother is like 10 years younger than he is, and so he's a little closer. We're about even, and for him, I think maybe that would have fit. So yeah, I mean, it's probably just a different timeline for Europe or whatever, but yeah.
Finally, since I know Brett has worked with Disney Infinity in some of his game design classes, I'd love to hear some thoughts on how Kingdom Hearts and Disney Infinity compare to each other in their use of the Disney licenses. Not necessarily who does it better, but what do you think the differences and similarities are?
Actually, I think you've actually played Infinity and I haven't. I've used it as a tool set, as a way to be like, oh, you don't have to model anything, but you can build things that are actually fairly complex.
I didn't know you did that.
That's cool. We did that at Wabash. Yeah, when I taught at Wabash College.
Okay.
There were a number of, we used Spark as well, and some other things. Yeah. And so it was an interesting toolkit because it lets you build lots of things. And there was kind of the monetization stuff that wasn't super great for that, which is like, in order to unlock more parts, you either have to play a ton or pay money. But one thing I liked and one thing I missed the first time I played through Kingdom Hearts, and now I'm kind of warming to, is in Infinity, you basically can use any characters anywhere that you have. And they're basically categorized by sorts of abilities, like, oh, these are flying types, or shooting types, or whatever. I don't remember the types, but there's like, they have sort of base skills that kind of make them kind of make sense in that way. And so you can basically switch at different points and be like, oh, I need a flying type to do this part of this challenge or whatever, and you have to have one, but you probably do. So I thought that was interesting. And now that I'm playing Kingdom Hearts again, I'm not feeling that need as much as I did the first time, where I wanted to spend more time with the characters I loved. But that is the thing that I felt the first time I played through Kingdom Hearts, is I just want to play the characters I love, and I don't really care about these other ones. And Donald and Goofy were still kind of a problem for that, right? We've talked about that, where those aren't characters we necessarily have a huge emotional connection to. And I was like, well, I want to play as Jack and maybe as Pinocchio, and like, I don't know what Pinocchio's ability would be. Give Splinter, I guess. And I think that the Infinity games pay off on that fantasy and just let loose on the, like, you're literally playing in your toy box of all the stuff you have, like action figure style. Like, oh, I have Disney, or I have Star Wars figures and G.I. Joe figures. Well, I guess the GIs are storming the Death Star this week, and it lets you kind of do that sort of thing, which I think is a real strength. But I don't know. You've played some Disney Infinity. You mentioned it earlier.
Yeah, no, I played quite a bit. At least of 1.0 and some of 2.0, but I didn't play 3.0, which I kind of plan to eventually someday, because I did enjoy them. There's one correction that I would have for you that you wouldn't know because you only played in toy box mode, it sounds like.
Yes, that's correct.
But you cannot use any character in any playset.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, yeah, no.
Yeah,
because all I saw was like building stuff up and being like, that's how we used it. Like, we used it as a toolkit. So
yeah, well, in toy box mode, it is brilliant in that way, because anyone that you have will work in toy box mode, and you really can mix and match and do fun things. But I would say that the fatal flaw of Infinity is that fact, because, and my understanding, I don't remember where I heard this. I think it's public knowledge, but Disney / even potentially Lasseter apparently put their foot down on not wanting to mix and match characters in worlds that they didn't belong, which I think is a complete missed opportunity, because one of the strengths of Skylanders, is my understanding, is you could do that.
Yeah. And that's what kids
I know
that's more creative.
I don't get it. I know I don't get it. Because I really liked, for instance, the Monsters Inc. playset. And I wanted to bring in, the Incredibles into there and see what fun stuff I could do with the Incredibles in that playset. So they had the concept of playsets, and then the characters so you could play usually like 5 to maybe 8 different, maybe it only goes up to 5 or 6 characters within any playset. But that was it. Only the ones that fit. So like in the Incredibles playset, you can play the whole family, but that's it. And I think the villains and stuff. But anyway, I really enjoyed them. They're just fun third-person action platformer games, and they got better and better.
Yeah.
And they're doing more and more with them. And so I think
mechanically they are much richer and stronger. And yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I just think that, like, playing Kingdom Hearts, for me, it really makes me miss Disney Infinity, and doing a take the Toys to Life stuff out of it, but doing a Disney Infinity kind of worlds merging, Disney IP game, where you're kind of you can play any character anywhere, but playing across these different worlds / playsets. Seems like it writes itself. I mean, I think it would be super fun, and you could unlock those characters in all number of ways. So there's definitely some, it's just the Disney Infinity games were really mechanics driven, right? Not systems driven, and Kingdom Hearts is a combo, kind of a hybrid of both. But every character in Disney Infinity I could relate to, because all the play sets were, the popular ones.
Right.
So
Yeah.
Yeah, it was fun.
All right,
so
here's your big sentence.
Mikkel's got us,
and then we'll wrap and call it.
And of course, a sentence for Tim. Multi-dimensionality in character, entomology, and genealogy presents not only an epistemological challenge, i.e., a sense-making conundrum for the cognitive neuroengine, but also an ontological challenge to the multiversal limits of vertically and horizontally aligned brand synergies, i.e., a spatially oriented challenge of imaginative elasticity vis-a-vis the existence of fictional phenomena clusters or worlds. As always, keep up the good work. Thanks, Mikkel.
Kind regards, Mikkel, who is the senior lecturer and director of Institute at the Institute for Danish Game Development.
Keep it up.
We have heard from
buddy.
Mikkel before. Yep, he did pretty well. You did pretty well with that, Tim.
I think I missed a couple, but
you did pretty well. I would not have done that well.
Epistemological.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That's a good one. He threw in all. He threw in. He took a philosophy book and he just shakes it, and like the largest words are what's left. So epistemology, ontology. There are a couple others there, but yeah, for sure.
Well, that one seems to relate to Kingdom Hearts, right?
Oh yeah. No, he is writing them specifically to address.
I wonder if he makes his students do this. If there are any Mikkel students listening,
that's right. Please send us an email and tell us more about his classes. Yeah.
So we can get back at him somehow.
We have to find a way.
Okay.
Well, I am now. Mikkel also. I don't know if he updated or added this review, but I had to get help because I didn't know what it was. I should have, but I haven't actually. It's from a movie that I haven't actually seen yet, and I'll tell you what that is at the end. I don't know if you've seen it, so we'll see. Okay, you ready? I will say it's from a comics property you know well.
Interesting.
Our comics. I mean, I should maybe say universe you know well, not maybe not this specific property. Okay.
All
right, here we go. I'm gonna totally mess up some of this. I tried it several times today. I just don't know the rap well enough, but we'll do our best. All right, here we go. Go Dev Game Club, go! 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 DEVG AMECL up. They play the old games to tell you all what's up. Dev Game flows. Dev Game Club knows when there's classic games to play. Dev Game Club goes. Tim Longo Jr. says, "Aw geez to everything. Everything? Well, almost everything. Still, he never fails to give clever system props. Ooh, check this mad designer chops. The Brett, the Duville, the thread that makes you chill. A programming wizard that a Brit would call true brill. He debugs his code with above average speed. Is he down with Dev Game Club? Only yes, indeed. Booyah! Booyah! Here's your favorite podcaster, Brett Duville. I'm a streaming master. What? Okay, and on the stream asker. What? I'm a great single tasker. It's Dev Game Club. It's the Dev Game Club. It's Dev Game Club. It's the Dev Game Club. It's Dev Game Club. It's the Dev Game Club. It's Dev Game Club. It's the Dev Game Club. Boom! Dropping ticks so sizzling and hot. I'm Tim Longo Jr. Come see what I've got. Tim Longo the leader. Tim Longo in charge. Read the long words. Mikkel, you're an arse. DGC hits every week even harder. There's no dever than we. We're as game as can be. Check it. Pillars and playthroughs and book recommendations. We're your weekly Dev Game Club felicitations. Go Dev Game Club, go. Go Dev Game Club, go. Go Dev Game Club, go. Go Dev Game Club, go.
Oh my gosh, even I was holding my breath during that.
I'm about ready to die over here. I'm too old for this shit.
You hit each one too. Is that the TMNT stuff?
No. No.
Oh, okay. I thought it was
Teen Titans.
No, I don't know that.
Yeah, so that's DC Universe. That's what I was.
No, I know. I don't read them, I didn't read them.
But it's a TV show, and they had a movie last year called Teen Titans Go. That's the show. Teen Titans Go to the movies.
Right. It's reminiscent of the Go Ninja, Go Ninja, Go.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it's a little bit. Yeah, definitely,
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
definitely
Yeah,
a little bit like that. Yeah, no, that's good. That's a good call. Yeah. Yeah, so in this movie, which I have in my Netflix queue and I'll probably get to pretty soon, is they don't have a movie in the DC universe, and all the other, Superman's had a movie, Wonder Woman's had her movie, Batman gets movies, but they don't have a movie. So they decide, in order to become the best heroes in the world, they have to go back in time and make them not be the heroes. So stop Krypton from being destroyed and stop Batman's parents from being killed or whatever, so that the Teen Titans can be the heroes. So they'll get their movie. And then it turns out they're not good enough to deal with whatever happens. So they have to go back and kill Batman's parents and blow up Krypton, whatever other stuff. I heard this premise described recently on a film podcast. I was like, that's actually a movie I have to see.
That's pretty funny. Yeah.
Completely ridiculous, but I am going to check that one out. Not the sort of thing I ordinarily watch, but I was like, it was Tasha Robinson, who's a film critic, and she recommended it. And she has made some great recommendations over the last few years, and I'm never sorry.
I've heard that show's not bad, to be honest.
Yeah, no, she's great.
Yeah.
Okay, anyway. Here we are at the time of the show where we say what we're playing to next. So we've just played up to through Monstro, or almost anyway, in your case. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I think we want to go and play up until the Hollow Bastion. You don't have to play through it, and I think you actually go there twice. But basically,
to the
Hollow Bastion.
But to the first, if we go there twice, you just
just the first time you go there. Yeah.
The Hollow Bastion.
Yes.
So this is
not.
I don't.
Well, so it's sort of reminiscent of other Disney worlds, but it is not a specific Disney world. I don't think. Okay. I think it's story linked to the Kingdom Hearts stuff, and it has some influences, but I don't think there's a person there. We are going to go to a few places that you'll know. There are 3 good ones coming up that I think are all pretty good. And then we'll go back to Traverse Town for a third, have to go there. And basically at the end of that is Hollow Bastion. So we will go up to that point, which should give us a fairly straight shot to the end of the game, I think, at that point. So you're basically seeing 3 full worlds and then Traverse Town again. And I'll leave it up to you how much grinding you want to do. So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
I just have to finish that boss. And so
you're not far off from that. So I appreciate that. Of course, thanks to those who sent in emails to devgameclub@gmail.com. And of course, that's, I don't want to call it a singing review, but a rapping review.
I don't know what that was.
to the iTunes store. If you send us, if you're in, I'm subscribed to countries all over the world, but if for some reason I don't get it, just send me an email and I will find it. I know how to do that. It's just some of them I don't have yet. So, but let me know if you don't hear from us. And yeah, that's what's going on. You can find the podcast on Twitter, as I mentioned earlier, at DevGameClub, or on the web at devgameclub.com, where I put all the show notes. And you can find him on Twitter at...
First of all, happy birthday.
Oh, well, thank you. At Happy Birthday.
At Happy Birthday with JR at the end. No, Tim Longo Jr. with the JR at the end.
And thanks so much for joining us, and have a good night.
Good night.